podcast, Pack Your Bags and Wait, Let's Talk About Homesickness. And today I have the pleasure to have with me Lucas and Kemal, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Kemal. I'm a third year student in international relations. I went to the University of California, Los Angeles last year, better known as UCLA. I chose to study at UCLA for a number of reasons. First, for me was the weather and the chance to be living in California for a year. It's a very good change from the sort of dull and sometimes depressing British or London weather, particularly around this time of the year, the sort of like November to March months where the sun can set pretty early and you feel like your day ends at 4 or 5 p.m. And before that it can be like cloudy or raining. So as much as I love London, the weather here is sometimes a really strong negative factor about residing and studying here. I also chose to study at UCLA because I had this sort of unique opportunity to study at a top-ranked U.S. university without the crazy costs of that I would normally have if I were a full-time student there. Because as a study abroad student, you don't pay your full-time tuition at King's, nor do you pay the full tuition at the receiving university. You get you get to pay less on each side. So to me, the idea of studying in Los Angeles, in California, for a year, and that year would cost me less than being in London for another year, was a unique opportunity that I just thought that I really had to jump on. So yeah, and I think there's other reasons as well that we'll probably discuss as we dig deeper into this podcast. I'll let Lucas talk now.
Thank you very much. I'm Lucas. I am also a third year international relations student, so I'm in the same year group and same cohort as Kemal is, and as Emilie is in fact. And I went to study to Hong Kong, to the University of Hong Kong. It was a brilliant experience. It was great. As Kemal said, the weather was it was also pretty nice. The beach was pretty close, which was brilliant. But one of the main reasons I went is because in 2019 I had gone there with my parents, and I really enjoyed the city. I really liked it, but I was only there for a bit less than a week, so I felt that I kind of had unfinished business. But for one reason or the other, when I applied to study abroad, I put Hong Kong as my third choice, because for different reasons. And in the end, I got given Hong Kong. And I'm not really a big believer in destiny, but if I have to believe in destiny at least once in my life, this is probably the one, because I put it third, but I had applied to King's because I had the opportunity to go abroad to Hong Kong. I still put it as my third choice, and I still got it. So it was a bit, yeah, it was quite special, and yeah, I'm glad I went.
That's nice. Actually, I'll add that I had a similar sort of situation where I put the University of California second, because I initially wanted to go to another university where one of my best friends studied, and then I didn't get it, and I was kind of like initially sort of pretty sad about it, and I had never even thought too much about going to California. I just kind of put it second because I knew it was a popular option, and I knew that they probably have some good weather and life is pretty nice out there. But then once I actually got allocated to it, and then in the second round of application got allocated to UCLA specifically, I don't think I ever imagined the kind of adventure that I was embarking on, because for me it was also a really special and fantastic year. I'd say one thing I want to add now as well at this point is probably the location of UCLA is really nice. I mean, within Los Angeles, as you may or may not know, it's a really huge city. It's unbelievably spread out, and UCLA is in sort of western part of LA, surrounded by Bel Air and Beverly Hills. It's really a nice area to live in, and the campus in itself is absolutely beautiful. I still to this day never seen anything quite like it. Between the sporting infrastructures, athletic infrastructures that are put in place for the students, the quality of the food in the dining halls, the different areas, communal areas for students, and even just being on the campus in general is a really nice feeling. I remember sometimes I'd be walking around and I saw people would come to do their sort of wedding shoots on campus just because the university was so beautiful. And
actually, that happened to Hong Kong as well.
Oh yeah, it did happen.
So I think that just goes to say how beautiful both campuses are. So I'd say before we dive too deep into the homesickness part of today, I'd say Hong Kong and UCLA probably have two very special campuses, and if you do consider studying there, that's one thing that you should go just for that, honestly.
Great promotion.
I know, they should pay us for that.
Well, thank you very much. So I have a list of questions, such as, So did you feel homesick? How often did you keep contact with your family, with your loved ones? How did you deal with it? What helped you to feel less homesick? Did you do anything in particular, like some sort of cooking or activity? Is there anything you wish you would have done different? And do you have any tips, recommendation on how to deal with some homesickness with our future study abroad exchange students?
Would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Did I feel homesick? Yeah, I did feel homesick. Essentially because I had obviously never spent that long away from my family. I spent in total 10 months away from home without being able to go back. Because essentially, to go to Hong Kong, we had to do 2 weeks of quarantine in a hotel. And it got extended to 3 weeks during the Christmas time. So essentially, if I went back home, to go back to Hong Kong, I would have had to do 3 weeks of quarantine in a hotel room. And that was essentially just too expensive because obviously you had to pay for the hotel rooms.
It would have been a nightmare.
Exactly. and just mentally not good.
It's quite tall, I think.
So essentially, most of us decided to stay in Hong Kong during Christmas time, and I left. I think we all left around August, and then we came back in June. So it was a long time, and I did feel homesick. I did feel homesick, but I mean, you just manage at the end of the day. Obviously, you get distracted with your life and with your friends, with your activities. You kind of, especially when you exchange, you've met so many people that you kind of don't get bored and you just have stuff going on every day. But it was, I think, more, I don't know about you, Kemal, but more the feeling of knowing that your parents miss you, that kind of, it kind of feels bad because you know that your parents are not having the best time because you're away and there's no way that you come back anytime soon. But at the end of the day, it's just trying to keep contact, trying to call them. I think I talk to them more or less 2 times a week, more or less, even more. So yeah, it's just you just try to do your best to keep in contact.
Yeah, I think one of the first things I'll probably say is, in addition to all the good points Lucas made, is I think homesickness can express itself in different ways for different people, which is really like the key thing that I want to emphasize today is like that, you know, Lucas and I and Emilie had all, I hope, amazing experiences on a year abroad.
I think we did.
But every person study abroad experience is going to be really unique and really different. And I mean that's going to be in so many different ways. It could be in terms of the places you end up visiting, the friend group that you end up making, the places you hang out, the academic interests you might develop, etc. So that also applies to homesickness, that every person can feel homesick in a different way. That can be that, you know, as Lucas mentioned, missing your family. For me too, it was the case that I had never spent more than 6 months away from my family, and it was the first time that I did it this time, and it was quite difficult, to be honest, at times. But it can also be for some people that, you know, just the simple notion of riding a bike in their neighborhood or going to their favorite food spot or seeing
missing
certain
their food.
people, missing their food, yeah, seeing certain people in their local, I don't know, neighborhood or stuff like that. They miss that. Well, these are all like really real things that no matter how much beautiful or new culture you're gonna discover and immerse yourself in wherever you go, there are things, specific things that you can miss from home, and you might not expect it. But I think also like one of the key things to sort of fight the feeling of homesickness, you know, Lucas mentioned calling your family. Obviously, I can't recommend that enough. That whether it's even if you're not super close with your family, your friends, you always got to remember that a lot of the time these people are just a phone call away. In this day and age, like you can video call anyone within seconds that they're available, and you know. People also want to know how you're doing, so you're not alone.
Did you find it difficult to have calls regardless of the time zone difference?
Yeah, it was sometimes. It was pretty difficult. For instance, I mean, just for me, my family is based in Geneva in Switzerland, so that was 9 hours difference. So a lot of the time it'd be like, I'd call them in the morning when they're having dinner, going to bed, or I'd call them when I'm having dinner and they're waking up the next day. So like, I know that balance of sometimes just calling them in the middle of the day to see how they're doing, something that you always sort of miss because of the time difference, so it can be difficult. But if you establish, like if you get used to like calling your family, I don't know, every night or every morning, that becomes your new sort of normal, and you start getting adapted to that, and it's your sort of, new reality. And even before this podcast, we're talking with Lucas, how sometimes I would even, because we have a mutual friend called Angie, who sometimes I would call even in Hong Kong, despite the the 16-hour difference between us. Or, I mean,
16.
Yeah, it was.
don't
It was
quote me on
16
that.
hours.
Is it 16?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
16 hours.
Hope
Or something like that.
Hope we don't get scolded by the listeners for being wrong.
16, 15, something
But,
like that. It was a long time.
Yeah. The bottom line is, you know your existing friendships with your different friends, and you know that a lot of the time they're a phone call away. So never hesitate to reach out if you're missing something. And it can even just be to hearing their voice or having the casual kind of conversation that you normally have with them can just restore so much normality into your mental consciousness and your body. And these are things that are really underrated in my opinion. So
Yeah, because and also, I mean, this is not necessarily the topic of this podcast, but you'll have another podcast on mental health. But obviously, I think homesickness and mental health go more or less hand in hand. And it is a bit tough sometimes to feel that you're away from home. Not only,
especially for celebrations like Christmas.
Exactly. Family celebrations are hard. This is the first time I've spent Christmas away from my family, and it was rough. But yeah, you kind of, I don't know. And the thing is that also homesickness, it might seem a bit weird, but it kind of also has some positives. Because, for example, in my case, I'm just generally quite bad at reaching back to people. We get, especially when we're abroad, we get so caught up in our lives. We just don't
have the time.
Not that we don't have the time. We just don't think of reaching out to people, and time just flies by. And we've got a lot of people to reach out to, family, friends from here, friends from there, that you just don't realize you've got the time. And the thing about being abroad is that I started kind of texting a lot with my grandmother, in the sense that she would kind of send me a news report of what was going on in Spain, the weather, the politics, and just a bit about her, about her dog, and I just kind of updated her about my life, about my friends, about my activities. So yeah, I mean, it is a bit daunting sometimes to feel like, oh, I'm going abroad 10 months. It's going to be daunting, and I'm going to miss people. But at the same time, this homesickness also brings some positives, and it's never black or white. There's always some positive to get from tough things like homesickness.
Yeah, that's what I meant. By every person's experience is really going to be unique.
Exactly.
In my case, I know I'm not very good at reaching out and keeping up my conversations and calls very often. So sometimes I am ashamed of that, but sometimes I wouldn't call my parents for 2 weeks or something. But I would daily send pictures. That would be my way of coping with homesickness. Nice. And they would send me pictures of what they would do, where they would go, what
you
they
showed me a lot of them. You showed me a lot of them.
And then I would send back my pictures of what I did today, or the food I ate today. So even if sometimes it's hard, or you don't have the time, or you forget to call, just pictures can be helpful as well.
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, because at the end of the day, it's kind of keeping contact with your reality back home. And when I mean back home, it's not necessarily in your home with your parents, but also in your university home in the UK in this case. So, and at the end of the day, you can keep in contact with your home in many different ways. As a bit ago, I was talking about how you miss the food, and obviously being Spanish, food is very important in my culture. It's very important.
I'm French, and I was missing cheese so badly.
I just some days I just decided to cook a tortilla de patatas, which is one of the most typical Spanish dishes, and which I do a very good tortilla de patatas. The only thing I can cook, honestly. But these things also.
So are we invited for dinner after this?
Accept an invitation.
Yeah. I'll cook for you any day you want. But essentially, you kind of find new ways to keep in contact with who you are and with your, because you don't only miss people, you also miss your activities back home. You miss your country, you miss your region, you miss your everything. So you kind of find ways to keep in contact. Even, I don't know, reading the news or reading a local newspaper also can kind of connect you to your town, your city, or whoever. So there's just a lot of ways to deal with homesickness, I think. Obviously nothing equals to being there, but there's ways and ways, I think.
Yeah, and I think one thing I wanted to add today as well was how it's important to sort of find your community in your new in this new reality that you're immersing yourself in. It can be for different things. For me, I play a lot of football, so just joining any sort of football team that was available at UCLA, whether it's competitive or not, was not really that important to me. It was a way of keeping in touch with an activity that I love doing, and sort of being reminded of how I can enjoy stuff back at home and here. And the good thing with university, I think, is that oftentimes it might not be the case everywhere, but oftentimes there are so many different societies available that you can join, super diverse, whether they're athletic or academic or just for like leisure. There are so many different ones. So I really like can't encourage you enough to just sort of, per your own research or just your own venturing around campus or whatever, to try and find things that might interest you, where you might find, you know, a base for yourself within this, where you think you could build some cool friendships or meet some nice people. It's really like something I can't express enough, because whether it's religious, athletic, or whatever, it can really help. For me, you know, you guys spoke earlier about Christmas. For me, as a Muslim, like not spending Ramadan with my family, the entirety of it for the first time in my life, that was pretty rough. But I was able to find, you know, this Muslim society, Islamic community at UCLA that were doing iftar every night, and it was an amazing experience meeting these new people, praying with them. All of these things are things that can really just relax your consciousness. And what else was I going to say?
I mean, you, Emilie, yourself, you went to the Orthodox Church quite a lot, and I guess that's also a way of connecting to who you are and kind of stop not missing home that much, I guess.
Yeah, it was really helpful. I googled Russian Orthodox Church in Hong Kong. It was a small flat, but it felt like a mini throwback home.
Yeah, of course.
And it was really nice to be in that environment of my usual environment for Christmas.
And it's also safety, isn't it? Because you're in such a different place, because at least, especially for you and I, and to US and to some extent too, it's such a culture shock. It's such a
which will
such
be discussed in another episode.
There you go.
Stay tuned.
It's such a big culture shock that to kind of go back to little venues. Exactly.
Yeah.
In Hong Kong, for example, talking about food again. I went twice to Spanish restaurants, which I don't normally go abroad. I don't normally go to Spanish restaurants when I'm abroad, because the best Spanish food you can eat is in Spain. But you know, you kind of I just miss Spanish food, and I miss Spanish culture, and so you know you kind of find ways of connecting to your religion, connecting to your cuisine, connecting to who you are. That is important. And honestly, everywhere you go, there's at least going to be someone who shares similar feeling of homesickness. Kemal said it, obviously, every homesickness is different. But you kind of find people who are similar to you. And it doesn't mean that you have to spend the whole time with them, because obviously you go abroad to meet new people and different people. I, for example, barely spend time with Spanish people. Neither do I here in the UK, but sometimes it feels good to connect with people who from your country and from
you might not otherwise meet.
Exactly.
I actually remember at New Year's you did your tradition of eating grapes with me.
I did, yes, exactly.
And I was like, what the
yes.
fuck?
Everyone was looking at us in a very weird way, because obviously in Spain you eat 12 grapes right after midnight.
Yeah.
So like you eat a grape every 3 seconds. So people were just celebrating and taking pictures of it was the tower right in front of the harbour. And the building was lit up, and everyone was taking pictures, celebrating, you know, hugging each other and stuff. And James and I were just chugging grapes, and yeah, it was. People were just really, really surprised. But again, it's just a tradition that like every single Spanish person does that for New Year's, and I've never not done it. So I told myself, well, I'm not going to not do it this year just because I'm a few kilometers away from home. I'll be many kilometers away, but you still find ways to connect to home, and yeah.
Another thing I was going to add as well is how you got to remember that you're not alone in your sort of study abroad experience. That first of all, you're probably, depending on the destination, going with a cohort of other study abroad students. First from your own university, but also there are other universities who have that program with your host university. So for me, for instance, you know, Lucas spoke earlier about culture shocks. I thought that Americans, you know,
you wouldn't have
for a lot of them, especially because UCLA is a public university, so a lot of the students there are from Southern California or other parts of California. So they're very much people who haven't really had the experience of living elsewhere than their own, you know, suburb or community or whatever other town they're from. So, you know, they have very different mindsets and worldviews. So when I arrived at first and I had a couple of conversations with people, it was very much like, you're very nice, but I don't see us two getting along too well. But then in the end, or actually as time went on, I started meeting other study abroad students who were there. And for instance, in my case, well, I became friends with a lot of Spanish students from
which is the friendliest out there. What can I say?
And other study abroad students as well from all parts of the world. But yeah, since we were in sort of similar situations where we arrive here and we're sort of taken aback by the local culture. It's, a sort of a easy starting conversation topic, and thank you. And it's something to build on. And in the end, a lot of my best friends over there were other study abroad students. So that's also cool because then once you go back to your hometown or host university, or your home university, sorry, you end up having friends from all over the world, which is a really cool thing to have because
you can visit them during holidays.
Exactly.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Free accommodation everywhere.
or reading week. So yeah, that's one thing I would encourage future study abroad students to do is to also like remember that you're not the only study abroad student there. That there are other people from elsewhere as well. So yeah.
So we talk about homesickness, and this is just a thought I just had right now in the spot. Obviously, you miss your home when you're there, when you're like in Hong Kong in our case, and California in Kemal's case. But you also realize that once you come back to London, you also miss your little life back in Hong Kong and I assume back in California. And it's funny because I wouldn't consider Hong Kong my home because I just didn't spend that much time there. But at the same time, you sometimes have kind of these reminders of like, oh damn, I miss my life there, I miss my little traditions there, I miss the food I ate, I miss the people I met and stuff.
It becomes a sort of home.
Exactly, because it kind of has a little home in your heart, right? So honestly, the tips that we just said of keeping contact with your home, normal home, you also kind of can do once you leave your study abroad location to do the same. For example, in London, I've been to a couple of Hong Kong restaurants. And with Emilie, you, me, Angie, Lily, and Dara, we also went to, and Raf, we also went to a Chinese restaurant one day, and it's also kind of keeping in contact with your life when you're abroad, because when we're in university here, we don't get to see each other as much as we did in Hong Kong. So kind of getting together with those people, with that same group of people, it's nice because you kind of connect to your life and to your little home that was your study abroad place, and it's brilliant because you kind of feel that you have another home where you can sometimes drift your mind towards when you're a bit anxious in London now. So,
and I definitely get the feeling that we immerse ourselves a lot in the local culture, whether it's the actual culture in itself or traveling a lot, which is another thing that I really want to recommend to future study abroad students is to sort of, depending on where you go, but in my case, and I think Lucas and Emilie's case, we were in destinations where we were closer to a lot of other places that we otherwise would have a lot of difficulty going to visit. Because, well, in my case, I was able to go to so many places, whether it's the Grand Canyon or Costa Rica or San Francisco, and there's so many places that like I was able to access easily from LA, but then from London or from Geneva, my hometown, well, it would be really difficult to try and combine those three destinations in a trip, and it would be extremely costly as well. Yeah. So once you're there, you're in closer proximity. There's different options to actually visit those places, whether it's driving or flights might cost less, or jumping on a coach.
Hong Kong, Thailand were so much cheaper than I expected.
Oh yes. I mean, my flight to Thailand cost €30. So which is ridiculous. And
instead of €1,000.
And then living in Thailand was much cheaper than Hong Kong anyway. So we just ended up. This is a bit outside of the homesickness thing because we were able to live in Thailand for a while. Emilie and I lived together in the same place for cheaper, and it's an opportunity you're never gonna have. And literally for a fraction of the price that it would cost to go to Thailand from London. So
and it even is linked to homesickness, I say, because going back to what you said earlier in the podcast about trying to find ways to distract yourselves from that sadness that fills you.
Take it as an opportunity.
Exactly. Take it as an opportunity to see all these places that, are really special and that you otherwise would have a lot of difficulty trying to travel to. So yeah.
Also, especially with us, because we essentially left Hong Kong in March instead of June when we should have left Hong Kong, because it locked down and there was just nothing we could do. All classes were online, all restaurants were closed, all bars, all clubs were closed, so we could essentially do nothing. And you kind of, I know that I would fill my day and fill my activities simply thinking about home and getting upset about being somewhere where I can't do anything instead of being home with my loved ones. Going to different places, apart from being a unique opportunity that we're probably never going to have again, or we never say never, but it's difficult to have again. And to be in that same situation.
Actually, when we were about to go to Thailand, I hesitated between going back home and going traveling.
Exactly.
But I ended up going traveling.
I think you made the right choice.
Yeah.
But it just clears your mind, and it distracts your mind also, and obviously it's just an amazing opportunity. You get to travel to places that, as Kemal said, it's just pretty unviable from Europe.
Exactly. I think another thing as well is even, for instance, when you do find yourselves in these moments when you're in your own room, kind of thinking about home and getting filled with sadness, I found that, I mean, it's a sort of lifestyle that I already had, but I think that decorating your room with pictures or other photos of anything, it could be your family, people, album covers, cities,
Making your
whatever
home,
it
exactly,
is that reminds you of your reality at home, it really helps because, I don't know, you can look to your wall and just be reminded of, I don't know, your father's smile, or your siblings, or an album cover that you might like, or a piece of art that you might like. And these are things that really help rather than having a sort of blank wall, and then it just forces you to be even more sort of trapped in your own mind and sort of having these thoughts that you'd rather not have. So yeah, I find that was like another thing that I sort of did unconsciously that helped a lot. So I think it's a good thing to consider as well.
As the most stereotypical international relations student, I bring my flags everywhere I go. so there you go. So when I went to Hong Kong and then now in London too, I've got my European Union flags. And it does help because you kind of feel connected to home even when you're not there. And obviously that can, if you're an Irish student, that flags are there for that. But you can also put pictures. You can also, as Kemal said, just do anything to make it as similar to home as you can and to be connected in a way.
Yeah. And I think another thing as well is, in talking about ways to distract yourselves is, I spoke earlier about you might develop new academic interests when you go abroad. And that's something that's very real because depending on whatever you experience or live there, you might develop these new interests that you might not have had before. I know in my case, for example, one of the most interesting classes I took last year was one from the African American Studies department at UCLA. And, African American Studies is not really something super common in London, let alone the UK. Yeah. So once you're at your host university, you get to you have the opportunity essentially to take these specialized courses or fields of knowledge, or engage with fields of knowledge that you might not otherwise have the chance to do at your home university. And I think that's something that's really worth considering as well.
Yeah, I agree. I in HKU, I took the course Issues in Chinese Political Philosophy, and it was very extremely interesting and a course that we don't have.
No,
at
not
King's.
at all.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, yeah, especially when you go abroad. I don't know how it worked in UCLA, but in Hong Kong, we had so much choice, so much to choose from. We were part of the social sciences department, which in itself had political science, psychology, history, geography, I think. And then you had to choose 50% of your modules from the social sciences department, so from a massively wide array of choices. And then 50% you could choose from anywhere else. And again, normally when you go abroad, your grades don't count. And I don't say there's a way of you should go crazy, you should do no work, and you should ignore university.
You still have the class.
You still have the class, exactly. But it does take a bit of weight off your shoulders to be able to explore things that you wouldn't necessarily explore back home just because you're afraid of the grades you would get. And that actually is something I kind of regret because I kind of did more or less what
you would do?
What I would do and what I'm confident with. And I don't necessarily regret it because I enjoyed my lectures and my modules, but it is true that I just didn't maybe use exactly venture myself in other academic areas of interest.
Yeah,
but
in my case, it was a bit similar in the sense that we did have a lot of freedom. The sort of instructions or vague guidelines you get are that you have to take essentially classes that are at least within the same field of knowledge as to what you would study. So in my case, IR. In our case, sorry, all of us. But then, and you essentially have to take a certain number of credits per quarter or per semester, but UCLA runs on a quarter system. And so what happened was, in the spring quarter, I only had to take classes worth 12 credits, which roughly came around to 3 classes. So I essentially had complete freedom over the 4th class that I wanted to take. And I ended up finding that there was a guest lecturer that quarter for a class called Rap, Race, and Reality. And the guest lecturer was Chuck D from the group Public Enemy, which is one of my favorite rappers and my parents' favorite rappers. So when I told them about that, they were like freaking out over the fact that like one of the coolest artists from their generation was giving me a lecture. So that was really nice. And in the end, I was able to actually like engage with him, and I wouldn't say befriend because he probably doesn't remember me, but since he's like a really famous person. But we definitely had some really cool conversations that are I still cherish to this day. So
Wow.
so yeah, and I have other friends who took classes about, I don't know, like the Beatles, or some people took some language classes that they might otherwise have been able to take. So it's really like, know what you have to do to pass, and then try and take as many opportunities as you can. And even beyond the sort of direct academic obligations, there might be different think tanks on campus that you're not aware of that might be interesting, or musical centers or athletic centers or whatever it is that interests you. So that's definitely something to look into as well.
Okay, one last question.
Sure.
If there's one thing you could tell to your pre-study abroad self, what would it be?
I might get sued by Nike, but I'm going to use the slogan and just say, just do it, because I essentially didn't want to go abroad. Funnily enough, because I had an amazing time, but I didn't want to go abroad. Essentially because our first year was all online in London, so and because our degree is only 3 years, I wanted to experience London at least 2 years here. But me and a friend of mine, we said, you know what, we're going to apply just because, we do no harm by applying. So I didn't even put that much effort into my application just because I didn't want to go abroad. Obviously, I put some efforts, but it didn't really stress me too much because I was happy with the fact of staying in London. And funny enough, I came back to London because I applied when I was in Barcelona. I came back to London and I received an email from the study abroad department and saying that I had been admitted to the University of Hong Kong. And I just had a feeling of like, I can't say no because it's such an amazing opportunity. But I was really close to not applying because it was just not something I had considered doing. And now I'm just so grateful that I did. So yeah, if I could tell myself something is just go.
Just do it.
And yeah, exactly. And also just don't be afraid of doing everything and anything, and don't be afraid of going, because obviously it's very daunting to go to a place with a different culture so far away from home when you know no one, because I did go with people from King's, but I didn't know anyone. I didn't know Emilie before going to Hong Kong, and look at us now. We're best friends. Because obviously we overthink a lot, and am I going to make friends? Am I going to enjoy my time? Am I going to be homesick? And yes, obviously there's highs and lows, but overall it was such an amazing experience that I would just tell myself, don't be afraid, go, because you're going to have an absolutely amazing time. And everyone that I've spoken to that has gone abroad, and I'm not using a figure of speech, literally everyone who I've spoken to who has gone abroad has very, very, very good things to say about going abroad. And obviously people have had better and worse experiences, but as far as I know, no one that I know has regretted going abroad. And I think that's the biggest testament to what an amazing opportunity we have as King's students to go abroad. And it's an opportunity that we should really, really, really take if that's something you're interested in. And especially don't have your fear take you back. And if you feel like you want to go, just go, because it's an absolutely worth it experience.
Yeah, I think similar to Lucas, you have to be confident in your ability that you can go and not be too nervous or afraid of it. Like, the world is so big and there's so much to see out there. And to have this sort of special opportunity to be studying and traveling and visiting and meeting new people, it's really just such an amazing combination, all engulfed in like one beautiful opportunity. And I really think it's something worth taking advantage of. If I can tell myself something before going, there's going to be a lot of celebrities. And I was very nervous meeting some of them at first.
Which one did you meet?
Plenty. I mean, from tennis stars to like I met Daniel Medvedev.
Oh, did you?
Many times.
I'm just obsessed with tennis, so it's very exciting.
I'd say, like, going back to what I was saying at the start of the podcast about how they have sort of amazing sports infrastructure at UCLA, that also means that so many of the celebrities that are passing through or live in LA come to use them. I mean, my friends would see like Adam Sandler in the gym, or or before the Indian Wells, which is one of the California big tennis tournaments. Most of the stars were training on our sports facilities.
The way I would die if that happened.
Since the campus is so nice, there were movies shot there. Christopher Nolan's upcoming Oppenheimer movie, part of it was shot on campus. So I got to see Cillian Murphy as well. He's a very small man. I will say that. I was kind of shocked. And yeah, I mean, there's always like really cool stuff happening. But that's part of the perks of being in Los Angeles and California. So if anyone ends up listening to this, ends up going there, chances are you're probably going to meet or see some really cool people. So that's nice.
So get your pens ready, essentially, is what Kemal is saying.
Get your pens ready. And also, like, I mean, as I said, I was pretty nervous meeting some of them at the start because I was like, I don't want to bother them in whatever they're doing and be like that sort of stereotypical
Annoying
fan rushing up with a phone camera, like ready to get a picture. But you know, just be relaxed, and at the end of the day, remember like that they also, it's part of their reality to have people come up to them, so they're not going to eat you. But on a large scale thing, for what I would tell myself is to, you know, to be more confident and not so nervous about meeting new people and just really trying to take advantage as much as possible of the opportunity, because, you know, so many people have, you know, their own, you know, issues, fears, and stuff, and not everyone is like this, you know, cool, confident person, especially in the case when we think of like American colleges, that's going to eat you up when you open your mouth to meet them. Like, that was one thing that, you know, people I spoke to who did study abroad there, and even myself for a second thought like, oh, you know, I'm going into UCLA, like the coolest school in the US, like crazy college parties, everyone's going to be like super cool and doing their own thing, whatever. And then when you get there, it's like, you know, well, not everyone is, and that's fine. You know, like you find your own friend groups, you meet different people.
It's such a massive university.
There's such a wide array of fantastic personalities and different people that you're going to come across. So it's just like, you know, don't be afraid to meet new people, and just be confident in your ability to do anything, I think. So yeah, that was the main thing I would tell myself, to really not be afraid to take on anything. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
Well, thank you very much. These were some great experiences. And I'm pretty sure your tips and advices and everything you said will be very helpful.
Yeah, hopefully it is.
Hope so.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for
Bye-bye.
inviting us.